Eyeball smack! Alright, so today I'm going to be kind of advertising one of my blogs. And I think ultimately what I want to do is put together a blog book. I don't really have like the resources for like a publisher, and it just gets really irritating because when you put all your stuff into it, you could self-publish and you're barely making it, and not a lot of people are reading you because you're just got a couple copies. And then when it comes to getting a publisher, don't really know how to do that. Kind of seems like you have to be famous first or have money or something that I ain't got. So basically, instead of wasting all my time with that, I just got to keep on thinking and keep on writing. So I'm just putting these books together through my blog. And then, maybe one day we get an editor. See, there's a lot of money costing that. But nevertheless, so this next project I want to do is a creation book that I'm going to call The Fact of Creation. If I might alter it, I don't know. But basically, it's just basically the thing of like not as much that creation is a faith issue. It's a fact. It is solid. Now, the case I'm going to make here in this one, it's called a defense of a neo-Tychonian solar system. But really, it's geocentricity. But basically, this is one of those issues where the psychology, and it's kind of loosened up a little bit in some ways and hardened up in others, but the psychology is the problem and not the evidence. Okay? And basically, it's hard for me because now I'm kind of like moving on up and I'm kind of in a position of leadership and taking some classes. At some point, I might become a doctor. Not a medical doctor, but get a doctorate. And so, there's a lot of fear when you're moving into a powerful position and yet you hold to something a little outside the mainstream. On the other end of it, now we have the foil of this is a double-edged sword. Now, obviously, a flat earth is a crazy idea. And so when people consider it a crazy idea, then when I talk about geocentricity, they want to lump that in there. So I started off my blog with a quote from Danny Faulkner, who is a creationist who was taking on the flat earthers. And he was careful to give a distinction between the flat earth group and the geocentricity group. The geocentricity group, we typically have understood science in a totally different context than what most people interpret science as. But we're still working with the evidence. And this is Danny Faulkner's view of it, okay? He says that we're still working with the evidence. He might not agree with us, but he knows that this is what we're doing. And we've got reputable scientists and all that kind of stuff, like Roger Spau. But basically, on the other coin, the Flat Earth group, they use conspiracy theory. And let's not think of this in a name-calling way, okay? What happens is that if I mention something that's basically known as an observation, they will typically react very strongly. And there's an evidence that I used for the idea that the Earth is central in the solar system and that the Earth is like the universe is going around the Earth. You'd think they would like this. But when I mentioned that to a flat earther once, they started saying, no, not the same measurements. It's all a conspiracy. And really, the sun and moon are the size of an orange. So basically what's going on is that everything they deal with, they can find a couple scientific facts, but who cares? Because they're not trying to develop a worldview scientifically. They are, what do they call it, cherry picking. They're cherry picking scientific stuff, and then they're using conspiracy for everything else. But that's not the position of geocentricity. The issue is that it's just shocking that this has been left out of the mainstream for so long. Just one assumption comes after another, and we end up building a whole apparatus without realizing, and so there's just psychological issues. But basically, I start off with that, and then I talk about some scripture. I don't go really deep on the scripture, but I throw out a couple proof texts. Basically, there are scriptures that say that the earth does not move. There are scriptures that describe the sun and the moon and the stars as moving. Also, if you look at Ecclesiastes 1, it'll describe all those and the wind. And so all of a sudden you have everything kind of moving in a geocentric pattern while the earth is not moving. Okay. There's two passages that are very strong about this issue. One is Joshua chapter 10, where Joshua, inspired by God, moved by God, says, moon stop and sun stop. I'm paraphrasing. And he says, you stop over here, you stop over there. And the day kept out for about 48 hours. So it was a 2-day, but it was only like one long day. And this was to help them winning a battle. And so basically, when you have that situation, you can't totally get around it because, if heliocentrism is true, then the earth is spinning. And so you'd really want to not be looking at the moon. You want to be like, earth stop. Okay? Because literally, he's like pointing, when Moses points his rod at the Red Sea, the sea splits. Okay? He doesn't say, air. It's you're looking at one thing and then something else is going on. That's a contradiction. Okay? So, basically, then I go through a whole wall, alright, huge amounts of quotations from ancient church fathers all the way up to, on the Protestant side, Luther and Calvin. And all of them are giving commentary, and they're all saying this is true, this is based on scripture, and they're giving a geocentric worldview, okay? And this goes against this pattern of, well, this is not something, no, that's wild, that's kooky. No, this is what the whole world believed and how they interpreted the scripture specifically. Okay, so we go through the scriptural interpretation and stuff like that. Then we move on from there, and I start going in the world of physics and finding physicists and finding other intellectual elites, okay? I go through several physicists, and different scientists and stuff, Stephen Hawking, some of the usual suspects, George Ellis. But there's also Bertrand Russell, okay, famous atheist academic guy, admits that Copernicus did not win with evidence. The entire argument of Copernicus versus the, Tycho Brahe, we'll go with him, or Ptolemy. But basically, the argument has nothing to do with evidence. It's an issue of interpretation. Okay? It's like, well, these things are moving, and this is what you have to realize. Okay? If we're going with this assumption of space cosmology, all right, then you don't know. Like, how do you know what up or down is in space? Okay, we know north and south. Okay, but is north up? Is south down? Because if we're doing that, well, then we're doing it geocentrically, okay? How do you know where you are? And the Copernican principle, okay, which is active today, says that there is no center to the universe, that it's all just a big goop. The problem is that a big bunch of goop, you can still find a center in, geometrically. So it is completely irrational what they argue. But they'd say, well, the Earth is moving around the sun. Okay, that would assume that the sun is not moving, but the sun is moving too. And then also the Milky Way galaxy is also moving. Okay, and I think it's like 2 or 3 million kilometers per hour or something like that. Altogether, that's how fast we're going. Like, because you got to add it up. It's not just that the Earth is spinning. Okay, it's also, the sun is moving. So the Earth is spinning and spinning around the sun, and the sun is moving around the Milky Way galaxy, and then the Milky Way galaxy is moving. So once you start getting into all that, then you start to see how crazy this actually sounds if you think with a critical mind instead of being a child being graded and indoctrinated. That's what happened. You got taught this stuff when you're 6. You can't question that. Okay, you had no ability to question that. You were just being taught. When they say this is true, you're like, okay, yeah, okay. So this is the problem, this psychological wall. But then once you start to realize, after scientists and physicists after physicists going on and on, just saying, look, no, it's 50-50. There's no thing. And you're like, oh, hold on. I was taught this is a rock solid fact. Hold on. No. So we start to deal with that, and then we have to deal with the substance of ether. Okay, does space have a substance? Einstein said no. And you know why? Because if there is a substance of ether in space, then he knows that there is not enough ether drag or ether current to move the Earth around the sun. Okay? So ether is a substance of space, and they figure, well, the substance is moving things around, and so it's got to move around the sun. It can't move around the sun. It's according to their measurements. What they don't tell you, they say is a null result. Well, it's a null result for what they're doing trying to get the Earth to move around the sun. But there is enough current that is found in ether to go around the Earth. And so then I go through peer-reviewed scientific journals. And the electromagnetic community does believe in the substance of ether. In fact, Einstein recanted what he said. He said in special relativity that there is no ether. Then he changes, and in general relativity, he says, yes, there is an ether. Okay, and they call it different things. He called it space-time. Then they start coming up with concepts like dark matter, okay, dark energy, okay, and all these different things, and they say, well, no, there's no ether, okay, there's just something that we called by the same exact, same exact definition, but a different name, and so this is what you get. But basically, once you start seeing that scientific evidence and all the experiments that have gone down to measure ether, and the Michelson-Morley experiment showing that the ether is not enough, well then all of a sudden it starts clicking, like, okay, hold on, that is the universe moving around. And so then we go through some different types of anecdotes. What makes us special? Why would we think it's more special? Well, for one thing, it's mathematically easier. That's how Copernicus got over, okay? Is he said, well, this is a mathematically simpler model than Ptolemy. But this system is mathematically simpler, and even NASA uses it with Earth-centered inertial framework. Not that they believe in geocentricity, but they know it works better. So since it works better, that's what they use, a Earth-centered inertial framework. Now, then we start to see some more of this anecdotes, okay? When we look in the Earth, okay, we see up top we have the North Star, which is always north of us, no matter if it's the summer or the winter or the spring or the fall, okay? It's always due north, right? So that would mean, well, it's right there. Job says the Earth is hanging. It's right there, okay? And meanwhile, all of space, according to what we see, spins around us. Meanwhile, you have the issue of the planes. A plane going New York to California, from California to New York, and neither one is faster. But if the Earth is spinning, you figure one would have an advantage over the other, and yet they don't. Then we amplify that a little bit more. Look at a little monarch butterfly. It starts off in Canada and flies all the way to Mexico. Well, wouldn't a spinning Earth, kind of mess with its trajectory? A little tiny butterfly? You think that the movement Of all that mass and gravity, wouldn't that affect things a little bit? Wouldn't affect the little things, wouldn't affect the jumbo jet. Okay? And then we start to notice, like, is there a unique relationship? The moon is geocentric. It does not spin. The moon looks at us, okay? So basically, the moon has that relationship with us. The sun has a relationship with the moon. All the moon's light comes from the sun. And the solar eclipse shows that the moon is in a perfect distance and diameter to cover the sun. Okay? And that happens every 2 or 3 years. So basically, you start to see, well, hey, this kind of makes sense. This kind of looks the same. You have a connection with the Earth and the whole universe. They call it the cosmological axis of evil. So basically, you have a amount of radiation that's running through the entire universe, okay? It's like a big lap band, okay? And it stretches around the whole universe, and then it crosses over with the Earth and the solar system and stuff. Meanwhile, they look up in the northern hemisphere of the universe, and you have all these galaxies spinning counterclockwise, okay? And they're all spinning, and it's like, okay, hold on. If they're all going counterclockwise, that means there is wind going around, okay? There is a universe that is spinning, okay? Oh, well, now we have a spinning universe, and guess where? It's all in the northern, so it stops right along the Earth's equator. The Earth's equator, the lap band, there's a big X right across the Earth. So these things kind of show us a lot of things. Also, I bring up the issue of the evolution of stars and planets. That doesn't work quite well. We don't know why there's a rock-solid little Pluto with moons on the outside edge when it's supposed to be the big gas planets like Jupiter, Neptune, and all that kind of stuff. So these ideas of how the planets got there, how did the solar system get there? Okay, and meanwhile, young Earthers are going to get mad at me for saying geocentricity, but if the Earth is going around the Milky Way, it takes 225 million years. How are you going to do that in 6 days? Catch you later.